Have you ever wondered what secrets hide in the vast emptiness of space? Astronauts have encountered anomalies that defy explanation, some downright terrifying. From rogue planets wandering in space to vampire stars sucking the life out of other stars, these are just some of the most dangerous anomalies discovered in space by scientists. In 2023, former NASA astronaut Leroy Chiao, who commanded Expedition 10 and piloted 3 space shuttle flights, they reported a perplexing encounter with 2 unidentified flying objects. UFOs. Yeah, real aliens. This was discovered while piloting his private plane over Texas. At an altitude of 9,000 feet, Chiao observed 2 metallic spherical orbs, each approximately 3 feet in diameter, approaching his aircraft. That ought to be terrifying. The orbs passed within 20 feet of his plane, moving at high speeds, and without any communication from air traffic control. This is bizarre. Now, despite the close proximity, the objects did not appear on his plane's radar either. Chiao speculated that the orbs might be part of a military drone program, but could not confirm their nature. This incident adds to the growing number of reports of mysterious aerial phenomena, including recent drone sightings in New Jersey and Staten Island, and the Pentagon's release of footage of an unidentified orb in military airspace definitely doesn't help. The incident underscores the need for continued research and open discussion regarding UFOs, especially given the increasing number of reports from credible sources like astronauts and military personnel. Have you ever heard about the Bermuda Triangle, but in space? Yeah, even scarier. It's a region in the South Atlantic anomaly where satellites and spacecraft experience strange malfunctions and disappearances. It's like a cosmic Bermuda Triangle, a place where technology seems to go haywire and vanish all without a trace. Some scientists believe it's caused by intense radiation from the Van Allen belts, which is a region of the charged particles trapped by Earth's magnetic field. Others theorize that it might be a result of dark matter or even extraterrestrial interference, which I'm on board for. Imagine a satellite perfectly functional one moment and then suddenly it loses contact. Its systems shut down one by one as if it were being pulled into a black hole. The strangest part? Astronauts who have passed through this region have reported strange occurrences, like seeing strange lights and feeling an eerie sense of dread. Some even claim to have encountered unidentified objects, massive silent vessels that seem to watch their every move. Yeah, almost like a ghost, but in space. It's a scary mystery, a place where the laws of physics seem to bend and break. And the worst part, we're still no closer to understanding what truly happens in the Bermuda Triangle of space. Radio signal blasters. Picture a super powerful radio signal blasting out from a faraway galaxy aimed straight at Earth, right at us. It's like a cosmic SOS, a message in a bottle just floating in the endless openness of space. Scientists are of course stumped, and as are we. They've never seen anything like this before. This signal is super strong, pulsing with energy, and some experts think that it might be signs of aliens trying to reach out to us. Others think it could be a natural thing, something we don't quite understand yet, but the real mystery is what the signal is saying. It's not just a simple message, it's a complicated pattern, a language that we still can't figure out. Some people think it might be a map or a plan for something way beyond our understanding. If this is a message from aliens, what do they want? And what if they're not so far away? The truth is out there, and it might be closer than we think. Oumuamua is a mysterious object that zipped through our solar system a few years ago. It was unlike anything we've ever seen before. It was a long, cigar-shaped, and it was moving way too fast. Some scientists think that it might be a natural object, like say a comet or an asteroid, but others have a more interesting and scary theory. Some believe that it could be a probe sent by an advanced alien civilization. Now imagine a spacecraft, designed by beings far more intelligent than us, exploring our solar system, all while being undetected. The strangest thing about Oumuamua is its acceleration. It seemed to have sped up as it left our solar system, as if it had its own propulsion system. What's even more frightening is the possibility that Oumuamua is not just a passive object. Some speculate that it could be this self-aware entity capable of gathering information and even interacting with our world. The thought of an alien intelligence lurking in the shadows of our solar system, well, that right there is enough to send chills down your spine. Vampire stars. Yep, this is exactly what it sounds like. These space monsters suck the life out of other stars, making them smaller and weaker. They steal energy from other stars to make themselves bigger and stronger. Talk about selfish. These vampire stars can get really, really big, stealing enough life force to last for billions of years. And as they eat, they shoot out these harmful rays that can mess up whole planets. This makes us wonder about our own sun. I mean, could it get eaten by a vampire star and die a slow, painful death? Well, let's hope not. Space is a dangerous place, and that's why I prefer it here on Earth. at least most days. Giant rogue black hole. What's more scary than a black hole in outer space? Well, that's easy. It's a giant rogue black hole in outer space. These giant black holes are billions of times bigger than our sun, and they just wander around space eating everything and anything in their path. Now, scientists think that these monster black holes could be hiding in the dark, and we might not even know that they're there. If one of these things came into our galaxy, it could destroy planets, stars, and maybe even our whole Milky Way galaxy. So what can make these rogue black holes even scarier? Well, I'm glad you asked. There's one called B3174525. This rogue black hole is moving through space at 3 million miles per hour, and it was discovered by the Hubble telescope in 2017. It is thought that this monster broke free after two galaxies crashed right into each other. Now it's just roaming around in space doing whatever it wants. Now the good news here is that it's 2 billion light years away from us, so for now, we're safe. But still, it's a scary thought that something so powerful is even lurking out there to begin with. The Great Attractor. Imagine our galaxy, the Milky Way, is being pulled towards this mysterious, powerful force. This force, known as the Great Attractor, rather fitting name, is so strong that it's influencing the motion of millions of galaxies. It's like a cosmic vacuum cleaner sucking everything towards it. Scientists aren't sure exactly what's causing this strong pull, but they suspect it might be a massive cluster of galaxies or even a supermassive black hole. As our galaxy is being pulled towards the Great Attractor, it is possible that we could collide with other galaxies along the way, and we could collide with even another galaxy. It would be a disaster, messing up our entire solar system and maybe even threatening life here on Earth. Coronal mass ejection. Imagine the sun burping out a giant fiery cloud. Now this cloud, called a CME or a coronal mass ejection, can be super dangerous if it hits Earth. Big if on that one. These CMEs can be incredibly powerful if they hit Earth. They can even cause serious problems. They can disrupt our power grids, cause widespread blackouts, all bad. They can also damage satellites and other technology that's currently in space. In extreme cases, they could even harm astronauts on the International Space Station. In 2012, a huge CME missed Earth by just a week. Scientists say that if it had hit us, it could have caused a massive blackout that would have taken years to recover from. Close call. Mega comet. This cosmic giant is so big, it's been nicknamed a mega comet. It's over 80 miles wide, which is bigger than most moons, and as this giant comet gets closer to the sun, it's waking up and shredding dust and ice every single day. Its sheer size and unpredictable behavior make it a cause for concern. A close encounter with this comet could have unforeseen consequences, potentially disrupting Earth's orbit or even triggering a catastrophic event. Yeah, let's hope that doesn't happen anytime soon. Thanks. Supernovas. If a supernova were to occur relatively close to Earth, it could have devastating consequences. The intense radiation emitted by the eruption could strip away Earth's ozone layer, leaving us vulnerable to harmful solar radiation. This could lead to increased rates of skin cancer and other health problems. For astronauts, a nearby supernova would be even more dangerous. The radiation could penetrate their spacecraft, exposing them, of course, to lethal doses. Even if they were shielded, the long-term effects of exposure to such an intense radiation could be catastrophic. Fermi bubbles. These sound innocent enough, right? I mean, bubbles? What are we talking about? Picture two giant invisible bubbles floating in space, each millions of light years wide, okay? They're massive. They're filled with dangerous, high-energy radiation, and if astronauts travel through any of these bubbles, they could get sick from the radiation very fast. It's like being in a really strong radiation zone for a very long time, and you're also in space. Plus, the radiation could damage the electronics on spaceships, which could be a big problem for astronauts who are far from home and plan on returning.
We've got life-threatening mishaps all the way from the United States to Russia.
And an update on 2 astronauts up in space with no way of coming back home as of right now.
2 astronauts, Sunny Williams and Barry Wilmore, are currently stuck in space with no clear timeline of when they will be returning home. In June, it was revealed that the 2 astronauts had become stranded on the ISS due to multiple malfunctions aboard the space station. On June 5th, the pair had gone up into space on Boeing human orbital spacecraft Starliner with the goal of spending just 8 days outside of our atmosphere, but unfortunately plans changed when a helium leak coupled with a failure in 5 of the Boeing's 28 reaction control system thrusters took place, leading to the pair becoming stuck on the space station with no way home. Recent updates have revealed that the Starliner is in no position to bring the astronauts back down to Earth, and so NASA is currently working on a backup plan that involves Elon Musk's SpaceX Dragon capsule, which was supposed to launch earlier this month, August 2024, but the launch has since been pushed back to September as NASA is currently considering cutting 2 of the 4 astronauts aboard the Dragon capsule in order to make room for Sunny and Barry. However, a decision is yet to be made. Really hoping they figure this one out sooner rather than later because the whole situation sounds really scary and kind of like a huge oversight.
The Soyuz 11 mission is one of the most tragic stories in space history. So in 1971, Georgy Dobrovolsky, Viktor Patsayev, and Vladislav Volkov became the first crew to successfully dock with and live aboard a space station, Salyut 1. This was a big deal at the time because living in space for an extended period was still a brand new and very exciting concept. Everything seemed to be going well. The team spent 23 days aboard Salyut 1 conducting experiments and sending back data to Earth, but as they prepared to return home, things took a turn. During re-entry, as they descended towards Earth, communication with the crew suddenly stopped. When rescue teams reached their landing site, they found that the craft looked totally fine from the outside, but when they knocked on the outside, there was no response. And when they opened the hatch, they found all 3 cosmonauts motionless inside the capsule. Patches of their skin had turned blue. They'd obviously suffocated. So a tiny valve had opened too early during re-entry, and the valve was supposed to open once they were safely back in Earth's atmosphere, but it opened prematurely, causing the cabin to depressurize. The crew had no spacesuits on at the time, so they couldn't survive the sudden loss of pressure. To date, this is the only case of humans actually dying in space.
The failed Apollo 1 NASA mission is arguably one of the most controversial missions in NASA's entire history, and that is saying something because in the past NASA has done quite a number of incredibly questionable things. While astronauts Gus Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Schaefer were not in space when the incident occurred, they were aboard the Apollo 1 rocket, which unfortunately never actually made it off the ground. While waiting in excited anticipation for their journey, which was supposed to end in the astronauts' safe return to Earth after having been the very first men to have ever stepped foot on the moon, a flash fire broke out inside the command module that was likely sparked by an electrical short that took place under one of the 3 astronauts' footrests. Because the capsule was filled with pure oxygen, it was highly combustible and the whole thing went up in flames within seconds. Unfortunately, the 3 men were unable to escape the burning spacecraft and perished inside. Of course, this led to extreme public outrage and a major demand for a reevaluation of NASA's safety protocols, which did occur, but as you can tell by many of the points on this list, they still have quite a lot of work to do.
Apollo 13 was supposed to be another routine mission to the moon, as routine as a mission to the moon can get anyway, but it quickly became one of the greatest survival stories in history. On board were astronauts Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes, who blasted off from Earth on April 11th of 1970. Everything was going smoothly until 2 days into the mission when an oxygen tank exploded. The explosion ruptured the service module, which was their main spacecraft, and left them with very little power. The lunar module, which was originally meant to land on the moon, suddenly became their lifeboat. It was the only part of the spacecraft that still worked and could provide life support. The crew and NASA had to figure out how to get these astronauts back to Earth using whatever they had left. There was a ton of improvisation and on-the-fly problem solving. They had to conserve power, so they turned off almost everything that wasn't absolutely necessary, leaving them freezing cold and struggling with low oxygen. They also had to manually adjust their trajectory to make sure they'd slingshot around the moon and head back to Earth. Meanwhile, NASA engineers on the ground scrambled to develop a plan to keep them alive and bring them home safely. And as insane and dire as this situation was, against all odds, the crew made it back, splashing down the Pacific Ocean on April 17th. And of course, as is tradition, Tom Hanks starred in the survival picture about this movie. I think he stars in like every survival biopic. Like, he just does tons of them. I'm not going to list them here because I can't think of them off the top of my head, but just list down below in the comments. I think we'll be able to come up with like 10.
In March of 1956, cosmonauts Alexei Leonov and Vladimir Komarov boarded the Vauxhall 2 and embarked on the first space mission to carry more than one crew member. And on March 18th, Alexei Leonov performed the first ever spacewalk, which was an amazing feat, but almost ended in Alexei becoming lost in space and subsequently dying of either exposure or asphyxiation. You see, when attempting to re-enter the Vauxhall 2 after his spacewalk, Alexei ran into a slight problem. His spacesuit had become filled with air, making it impossible for him to re-enter the spacecraft feet first as intended to ensure the safety of the astronaut. Luckily, his training had prepared him for all kinds of hazardous situations, and so he quickly came up with a plan that involved him slowly releasing the excess air from his spacesuit so that he would be able to enter the Vauxhall 2, although it was clear that feet first was no longer an option, and that he would have to enter the craft head-on in order to survive the ordeal. Oh, and if he didn't complete the task within the next 40 minutes, he would surely suffocate in the vacuum of space because his air was running out, and his body temperature was rising rapidly due to extortion. Luckily, he remained calm and was able to avoid disaster. Unfortunately, his partner, Vladimir Komarov, would not be so lucky in the years to come.
Vladimir Komarov was a Soviet cosmonaut set to pilot the Soyuz 1 mission in 1967. The mission was supposed to be a huge success for the Soviet Union, but Komarov was well aware that there were a number of technical problems with the spacecraft. He even reportedly told a close friend that he knew he wouldn't be coming back alive. But he chose to fly anyway, fearing that his backup, Yuri Gagarin, would be sent instead. Sure enough, as soon as Soyuz 1 launched, things started to go wrong. One of the solar panels failed to deploy, which meant the spacecraft didn't have enough power. Communication was spotty, and Komarov was left struggling to manually operate the spacecraft. Back on Earth, engineers were trying to come up with solutions, but the problems just kept piling up. Komarov stayed in orbit, isolated in a faulty spacecraft with very little hope of a safe return. But he stayed calm and collected as he could, trying to make the most of this very bad situation, but the whole time he must have been aware that his chances of survival were very slim. As Komarov attempted to return to Earth, the parachutes that were supposed to slow down the descent failed to deploy properly, and it tragically crashed, killing Komarov instantly.
On January 28th of 1986, NASA's Space Shuttle Challenger burst into flames no more than 75 seconds after takeoff, ending the lives of all 7 astronauts aboard the craft, including Krista McAuliffe, a school teacher who had joined the mission as part of the Teachers in Space project, with the hopes of filming educational videos in space, in the hopes that it might reignite American children's love of learning. At a height of about 46,000 feet and above the Atlantic Ocean, the Challenger practically disintegrated, while onlookers watched in horror as the fates of the astronauts became sealed inside of their airtight vessel. The incident later became quite the scandal, as after it occurred, NASA released a report stating that while the organization was unaware of what caused the accident, they were sure that the cabin crew would have been unconscious at the time of the explosion due to the cabin's pressure. A report that was later dismissed as a poor excuse for a cover-up attempt when it was revealed that the crew was most likely fully awake and possibly fully aware of the fact that an explosion was about to take place. Furthermore, the Rogers Commission also revealed that NASA had not taken proper safety precautions prior to the mission. Not only that, but they also never received an engineer's stamp of approval declaring the spacecraft flight ready prior to the attempted launch. Again, a massive oversight.
The Space Shuttle Columbia was the oldest shuttle in NASA's fleet, and it had been on numerous successful missions before. On January 16th of 2003, it launched on its 28th mission with a crew of 7 astronauts. Rick Husband, William McCool, Michael Anderson, Elin Ramon, Kalpana Chawla, David Brown, and Laurel Clark. And during the launch, a piece of foam insulation broke off from the external fuel tank and hit the shuttle's left wing. Now, NASA knew about this foam strike, but didn't realize the true extent of the damage. While the crew continued their work in space, engineers on the ground debated the severity of the situation, but no one fully grasped just how bad this really was. After 16 days in space, Columbia began its descent back to Earth on February 1st of 2003. As it re-entered the atmosphere, hot gases entered the shuttle through the damaged wing, causing it to snap right off. There was nothing the crew could do at that point. The shuttle just completely disintegrated over Texas and Louisiana.
Another near-death experience took place on October 16th of 1979 when cosmonauts Vyacheslav Zudov and Valery Rozhedestvensky attempted to re-enter Earth's atmosphere in Soviet spacecraft Soyuz 23. Unfortunately for the two men, strong winds caused the vessel to land 75 miles 120 kilometers away from its targeted landing point. And to make matters even worse, the spacecraft landed in an icy lake. But wait, there's more. Almost immediately after touchdown, Soyuz 23's parachute, which had deployed to slow the spacecraft's descent, began taking on water, and subsequently dragging the Soyuz down towards the bottom of the lake as temperatures inside of the main capsule reached negative 17 degrees Celsius, 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Many failed rescue attempts were made, including an attempt to airlift the capsule, which was ultimately just too heavy. But eventually, the remaining pieces of Soyuz 23, including the main cabin containing the men, were dragged ashore, 11 hours after it had touched down on Earth. When rescuers opened the cosmonaut's hatch, Zudov was unconscious and frost had almost completely lined the interior of the vessel. Luckily, both astronauts did make a full recovery, but had they spent any longer in the icy waters of Russia, things could have been way worse.
The Apollo 12 mission was the second manned trip to the moon. It took place just a few months after Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin's Apollo 11 landing. This was a big deal because it was another chance to prove that landing on the moon wasn't just a one-time thing. And Apollo 12 lifted off on November 14, 1969, with astronauts Charles Conrad, Richard Gordon, and Alan Bean on board. Right as the rocket was climbing into the sky, though, something pretty terrifying happened. It was struck by lightning. Not once, but 2 times. The first strike was even visible to the people watching from the ground, which would have been, a pretty incredible sight, but no doubt horrifying. Like, my God, what happens when lightning strikes a rocket? Well, luckily, in this case, everything was still working fine. The electrical systems rebooted, and they continued on with the mission. Once in space, the Apollo 12 team went on to land on the moon just like planned, but it was definitely not the smooth trip up that they'd been hoping for. As Pete Conrad famously stated, "That may have been a small one for Neil, but that's a long one for me." And the return to Earth wasn't easy either. When the spacecraft splashed down in the ocean, a big wave hit them. This jolt knocked a 16mm camera loose, and it hit astronaut Alan Bean on the head, giving him a pretty nasty cut. Thankfully, Pete Conrad jumped into action and patched Bean up right away.
I saw this illumination. There's a light out there that's following us. Comes an unidentified flying object.
They're here, they're parked on the side of the crater, they're watching us.
In the vast emptiness of space, strange encounters can't always be explained away. From shadowy figures floating outside the ISS to mysterious lights dancing across the lunar surface, astronauts have experienced eerie moments that NASA would rather dismiss or ignore. But what if these encounters point to something more? What if there are forces watching us, lurking just beyond our reach? Today we're diving into the most unsettling stories of astronauts coming face to face with the unknown and the cover-ups that followed. Get ready, because these stories will make you question what really awaits us in the darkness of space. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Apollo 16's mysterious footage. During the Apollo 16 mission, something bizarre was captured on film. A peculiar object hovering above the moon's surface, silently casting a shadow that seemed too strange to ignore. This wasn't just a blur or a flash, it was a well-defined shape that hovered with an almost deliberate stillness, looking nothing like any known spacecraft or equipment. When the astronauts reviewed the footage, the object's structure was uncanny, almost like it was observing from above. NASA quickly attributed it to a piece of the lunar module's equipment, brushing it off as nothing more than an ordinary part of the mission. But skeptics weren't so sure. The object's angles, the way it reflected light, and its stationary position seemed too purposeful. It was almost as if it had its own intelligence, waiting and watching. Could NASA really expect people to believe that such a bizarre, hovering anomaly was just debris? What was up there, and why did NASA appear so eager to silence questions about it? Some argue this was the moment moment NASA's cover-up culture really began. What other secrets from the vast emptiness of space are they really keeping from us? In our number 9 spot today, we have STS-80's circular UFOs. During shuttle mission STS-80, something truly unexplainable unfolded right outside the spacecraft. Cameras recorded several glowing orbs, perfectly round, almost mesmerizing, drifting through the darkness. But these weren't just random lights or reflections. These orbs moved in deliberate circular patterns around the shuttle, almost as if they were performing a carefully choreographed dance. The astronauts watched as the glowing spheres traced intricate paths, changing directions and speed in ways that suggested they were under intelligent control. Was this a cosmic greeting or something far stranger? NASA quickly dismissed it as space debris, a familiar catch-all explanation, but how many pieces of space debris glide in perfectly synchronized formations, pulsing with an eerie glow? Those who have seen the footage argue that NASA was too quick to sweep it under the rug. What exactly were these orbs, and why did they seem so intent on circling the shuttle? In our number 8 spot today, we have Gordon Cooper's UFO sighting on Mercury Atlas 9. On his Mercury Atlas 9 mission, astronaut Gordon Cooper experienced something truly otherworldly.
We never could get as high or as fast as they were, so to really positively identify them, but they were metallic looking and saucer in shape.
As he orbited Earth, he noticed a greenish glow outside the window, a pulsating light moving steadily towards his spacecraft. Cooper, one of NASA's most experienced astronauts, knew the difference between atmospheric phenomena and an actual object in space, and this was no ordinary glimmer or reflection. He described it as a distinct, glowing object that hovered for a moment, almost observing him, before zipping off at an impossible speed. Cooper immediately reported the sighting, but back on Earth, NASA stayed eerily quiet. There were no follow-up reports, no debriefings, no press conferences, just a subtle shift in focus, as if the incident had never happened. For years, Cooper would go on to describe the event, firmly convinced he'd seen a genuine UFO, yet NASA seemed to push his story aside. Was this a case of an alien encounter brushed under the rug, or was NASA actively covering up evidence of visitors from beyond? In our number 7 spot today, we have the Buzz Aldrin UFO sighting. During the legendary Apollo 11 mission, as Buzz Aldrin and the crew made their historic journey to the moon, Aldrin caught sight of something that didn't belong, an object hovering nearby, shimmering in the blackness of space. As it moved alongside their spacecraft, just close enough to be unmistakable, yet unlike anything they had launched, Aldrin reported the sighting and NASA quickly dismissed it, chalking it up to part of the spacecraft itself. But for Aldrin, the explanation didn't quite add up. The object had a peculiar shape and movement different from the parts of the craft that he knew very well. Over the years, he hinted at his lingering doubts, openly wondering if they'd had an unexpected visitor along for their journey. Was it simply space debris, or was it something much more mysterious, possibly watching the Apollo team as they made their way to the moon? NASA's swift dismissal only fuels the intrigue. Why shut down the questions so fast, especially on a mission as historic as Apollo 11? In our number 6 spot today, we have the ISS Blue Flash incident. In 2021, a routine night aboard the ISS took a strange turn when astronauts spotted something startling on Earth's horizon. A brilliant blue flash that cut through the darkness, illuminating vast stretches of the planet below. But this wasn't any ordinary lightning storm. The flash was so intense, so vibrant, and appeared in a way none of the crew had ever seen before, even with their countless hours observing Earth's weather from space. As the glow faded, the astronauts exchanged uneasy glances. Was this a rare atmospheric phenomenon, or could it be something entirely unknown? NASA quickly assured the public that it was just lightning, but the astronauts weren't so convinced. They argued this flash was unique, unlike anything in Earth's atmosphere, as if it came from another force entirely. What did they really see that night? And if it wasn't just a storm, why was NASA so quick to dismiss it? In our number 5 spot today, we have the alien structures on the dark side of the moon. During their missions, several Apollo astronauts encountered something on the moon that still fuels mystery today. Strange structures on its far side, the so-called dark side where sunlight never reaches. As they orbited over the shadowed landscape, they spotted formations that didn't look natural, massive angular shapes that seemed to rise from the lunar dust. Some astronauts even snapped blurry images of what appeared to be towering geometric objects casting long shadows across the desolate terrain. Yet when they returned to Earth, NASA brushed off their accounts, calling the sightings optical illusions or just rocks. But the images told a different story, hinting at structures that seemed too deliberate to be dismissed so easily. Were these signs of an ancient civilization, or perhaps evidence of something or someone using the moon as a base? NASA's silence only added fuel to the theories, leaving people to wonder if the dark side of the moon hides secrets we are not meant to uncover. In our number 4 spot today, we have the strange lights during Apollo 17. On the final Apollo mission, Apollo 17, something strange was caught in the corners of the astronauts' vision. Bright, sporadic flashes of light, both in the vastness of space and directly on the moon's surface. These weren't subtle, passing glimmers, they were vivid and intense, illuminating parts of the lunar landscape in pulses that were impossible to ignore. NASA's official explanation? Cosmic rays interacting with the astronauts' retinas, causing them to see phantom lights. But the crew was skeptical. The flashes came too frequently, sometimes in quick succession, almost like signals, and the brightness was far stronger than any previous experience with cosmic rays. The lights seemed to pulse from specific points on the ground, as if something beneath the surface was trying to get their attention. Or perhaps send a message. Was this the moon's way of signaling its secrets? Or was something else hidden in the lunar shadows too unsettling for NASA to reveal? In our number 3 spot today, we have the Chris Cassidy Space Station UFO. When astronauts spot something unexpected floating outside the International Space Station, you can bet that it definitely raises eyebrows. This time, NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy had his camera ready as a strange object drifted by the ISS on August 19, 2013, catching a glimmering, unidentified piece slowly floating against the blackness of space. NASA was quick to step in, stating that it wasn't a UFO, but rather an antenna cover that had come loose from the Zvezda service module, a piece that Russian ground controllers confirmed as part of the station's own hardware. The cover, NASA explained, is part of the low-gain WAL antennas used to guide ESA's unmanned cargo ships during docking. While NASA assured everyone it posed no threat to the station, the incident definitely still had people talking. Was it really just space debris, or could there be more to this routine hardware malfunction? In our number 2 spot today, we have the STS-75 tether incident. During the 1996 STS-75 mission aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia, a routine experiment took a wild turn that would become one of NASA's most mysterious encounters. When a long tethered satellite unexpectedly broke loose and drifted away, cameras captured something even stranger. Dozens of glowing orbs began to appear, moving and swarming around the tether. These orbs weren't just floating aimlessly, they seemed to pulse with light, darting around in what looked like coordinated patterns. While NASA tried to brush it off, labeling the lights as space debris, the footage told a different story. These orbs had a strange consistency in size and shape, and their behavior looked oddly intentional, as if they were curious observers investigating the tether. Could this be an encounter with some form of intelligence, watching our astronauts from a distance, or was NASA hiding something deeper behind their very vague explanations? To this day, the STS-75 orbs remain a captivating mystery, fueling theories of alien watchers lurking in the vastness of space. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Apollo 14 Intuition experiment. During the Apollo 14 mission, astronaut Edgar Mitchell wasn't just focused on exploring the moon. moon. He had a hidden agenda of his own. Mitchell secretly conducted experiments in telepathy, attempting to send and receive thoughts from space to Earth. But things took an even stranger turn when halfway through the mission, he reported feeling a powerful presence beside him. It was an inexplicable sensation, something he described as distinctly non-human, yet somehow aware of him, watching as he carried out his tasks. Mitchell, a scientist and a military man, wasn't one to jump to wild conclusions, but the feeling was so profound that he later spoke openly about it, suggesting he may have sensed an intelligence beyond our understanding. NASA, of course, stayed quiet on the whole matter, downplaying Mitchell's experiment and his eerie experience as nothing more than just plain old imagination. But for Mitchell, this was more than just a feeling. He'd sensed something that he believed was out there observing him. Could there really be other intelligences waiting for us in the depths of space, making their presence known only to those who dare to reach beyond Earth?
In space, no one can hear you scream. Even though that's the tagline to one of the greatest science fiction movies ever made, there is some truth to it. Astronauts are isolated from the rest of the world while they're up there, far from the safety of home, out in the cold, vast black void that is space. So here are some of their stories. We're going to start out the list with an incredibly alarming situation. Really, this is the last thing you'd want to find in space, aside from an alien face hugger on board. A freaking air leak. On the 6th of June of 2018, the Soyuz MS-09 mission launched. 3 astronauts, including a Russian commander and 2 flight engineers, 1 American and 1 German, were transported to the International Space Station. For a couple of months, their time on the ISS was pretty routine as being in the middle of space can be, anyway. That was until the 29th of August. It was in the middle of the night, and the crew received a message from Mission Control. They detected a slight change in air pressure and found that there was a small air leak. There was a 2mm hole in the orbital module. So 2mm, tiny, but in space, this would be incredibly alarming. Fortunately, they managed to seal up the hole and there were no more changes in air pressure, but they had some questions as to how this hole got there in the first place, and it turns out something shady could have gone on. Apparently this hole had been hidden with a, quote, low-quality patch job, and had apparently been created with a drill. Russian officials became suspicious of NASA, accusing them of intentionally sabotaging the mission. There were even theories that one of the crew members themselves drilled the hole, as it was found to have been drilled from the inside. A Russian tabloid accused the American astronaut on board of creating the hole after she apparently had a failed romantic relationship with another member of the crew. Just really outlandish stuff. The whole thing was a complete mess, and we still don't know exactly what went on here. Next on the list we have the Space Snake. Story Musgrave is a retired NASA astronaut who's had more experience in space than most in the field. He also has 6 degrees, he's a physician, a mathematician. The man is incredibly experienced and intelligent. He also firmly believes that there is life out in space, and he may have had a first-hand experience. He claimed to have seen an 8-foot-long snake-like creature on 2 separate space missions. He was featured on an episode of the TV series Sightings, speaking about his odd experiences with the creature, and was quoted saying, "On 2 of my missions, and I still don't have an answer, I have seen a snake out there, 6, 7, 8 feet long. It is rubbery because it has internal waves in it, and it follows you for a rather long period of time. The more you fly in space, the more you see an incredible amount of things out there, and that sort of brings to you really a certainty that other living creatures are out there. Some incredibly primitive, more primitive, some just proteins coming together, amino acids, and just some single-cell organisms, and other civilizations that have been around for a million years that are doing unimaginable kinds of things." The SpaceX CRS-7 incident. The SpaceX-7 was a mission to send an uncrewed spacecraft, the Dragon, to resupply the International Space Station. It was the Dragon's 9th flight. It launched from the Falcon 9 launch vehicle, and at first, everything seemed fine, but 139 seconds into the launch, a cloud of white vapor appeared, and there was a sudden loss of pressure in the liquid oxygen tank of the Falcon 9's rocket's second stage. The rocket continued for a few seconds before breaking apart. The Dragon CRS-7 capsule was thrown clear of the explosion and hit the ocean. SpaceX said the capsule could have been saved if the parachutes had deployed, but the software didn't have the right instructions for that situation. It was found that a metal piece called a strut had failed. This particular strut held a high-pressure helium bottle in place within the rocket's liquid oxygen tank. Because the strut failed, helium rushed into the tank, causing too much pressure, and it eventually burst. Now, luckily, there was nobody on board. Again, this was an unmanned mission, but it just goes to show how much of a risk spaceflight is. Every time astronauts launch into space, they're risking their lives. Things can just go wrong at the drop of a hat. The same goes for this next failed mission, the Cygnus Orb 3. Again, nobody aboard, but it would have been disastrous if there was. So this was an attempted flight of an automated cargo spacecraft. Again, it would have brought food and supplies to the crew of the International Space Station. This would have been Cygnus's fourth flight to the ISS. The Antares rocket carrying the Cygnus spacecraft launched on October 28th, 2014. Just 15 seconds after liftoff, though, there was a failure in the first stage's propulsion system. The rocket started falling back to the launch pad. This could have been quite a disaster. A rocket plummeting into the Earth, might cause some bodily harm to workers down there. So in order to prevent that from happening, the range safety officer activated the flight termination system. Basically, the thing self-destructed just before hitting the ground. How awesome would it be to press a button that makes a rocket explode in midair? I imagine it being a big red button with explode written on it, but it's probably a bit more sophisticated than that. This explosion was so intense, though, that it could be felt 20 miles away. Thankfully, no one was injured, but there was substantial damage to the launch pad. Next on the list, we have the Nauka thruster glitch. Nauka, or the Multi-Purpose Laboratory Module, is a module of the International Space Station. When it successfully docked on the station on July 29th of 2021, something kinda scary happened. Its thrusters started acting up, causing the entire station to rotate around. So the Nauka successfully docked with the ISS, and everything seemed fine, but a few hours later, while the crew was preparing to open hatches, Nauka's onboard computers had a glitch. This caused the module to unexpectedly fire its thrusters, making the ISS suddenly rotate. Now, astronauts are trained to deal with stuff like this. They know that glitches can happen and things can go wrong, but just imagining being out in a rotating space station in the middle of the black void of space, that's a pretty freaky situation to be in. Ground controllers were able to fix the glitch though, and the station eventually returned to its proper position. Alright, you know what really sucks? Toilet trouble. Issues with plumbing, it just completely upends your life. You feel lost and confused. As bad as a broken toilet is here on Earth though, imagine being stuck up in space and realizing you have a busted crapper. That is a truly horrifying thing to discover. In 2021, astronauts departing from the ISS realized they were going to have to head back to Earth without a toilet. The 4 astronauts had a 20-hour journey back to Earth in their SpaceX capsule, and they'd have to do their business in diapers the entire time. Oh, and this is the same crew that had to endure the whole thruster malfunction that had the entire space station rotating, by the way. Not the luckiest bunch here. By Earth standards, anyway. By astronaut standards, I guess they kind of are pretty lucky, because they made it to space and back without, dying. Next up, we have even more toilet trouble. Turns out there's been issues on the International Space Station as well. This incident happened back in 2019. The crew of the ISS was attempting to upgrade their toilet and ended up causing a water leak. The toilet they currently had on board had been installed in 2008 and was a bit outdated. This new universal waste management system would be less clunky, it was cleaner, and just overall more efficient. But one of the water pipes leaked and 2.5 gallons of water started floating about the station, which the astronauts then had to collect. Luckily, the pipe leaked before the toilet was officially christened, because that would have been truly nightmarish. Floating around, collecting water, fine. Actually might have been kind of fun. Floating around in space having to gather up yellow or brown water, not quite as enjoyable. I also don't know why they didn't install that toilet when the capsule was still on the ground, but oh no, it's on the space station. It's up in space. Never mind. In June of 1965, astronauts Ed White and James McDivitt spotted something strange while passing over Hawaii. They were in a Gemini spacecraft spacecraft when they spotted something that looked like a UFO. It was metallic, and they also described it having long arms sticking out of it. McDivitt spotted the object while White was asleep. He grabbed a 16mm film camera to try and take footage of the object. White then woke up saying he spotted the thing as well. McDivitt contacted the capsule coordinator, attempting to describe what they were seeing. In part of the transcript, McDivitt is quoted saying, "I just saw something else up here with me, but just as I was getting close enough to take a good picture, the sun got in the way and I lost it." He went on to say, "It had big arms sticking out of it, it looked like. I only had it for just a minute. I got a couple of pictures with a movie camera and one with the Hasselblad, but I was in free drift. Before I could get the control back, I drifted and lost it." Now this one needs to be taken with a grain of salt, or a lot of grains. It's a Reddit post made by a now deleted user attempting to stay anonymous. They claim to be an ex-astronaut who experienced something strange while on a mission, and I just think this is a spooky story, real or not. They write, "I can't disclose my identity, but let's just say I've been around the celestial block a few times. It was a routine spacewalk checking the exterior of the ISS. Everything was humming along when I noticed this faint glow just beyond the Earth's horizon. At first I thought it was the sun playing tricks, but this was different. It was a subtle shimmer, almost mirage-like. I radioed Houston to check if there were any anomalies, but they said all systems were normal. It was just strange, a gentle, pulsating light, and not blinding, but kind of hypnotic. As I reached out to grab a handrail, I felt a strange, static charge. That's when things got downright eerie. I saw these tiny, luminous particles dancing around me, forming intricate patterns. Suddenly, the particles converged into this figure, humanoid in shape, but made of pure light. It just hovered there, staring at me. No facial features, just a luminous silhouette. The next thing I knew, the figure disappeared into those shimmering particles and floated away. I radioed Houston, but they couldn't pick up anything unusual on their end. I finished the spacewalk, returned to the station, and went about my duties like nothing happened. But every time I look down at Earth, I can't shake the feeling that there's something out there, something beyond our understanding. Call it space-induced hallucination or whatever, but I swear that encounter was unlike anything I've ever experienced. And finally, we have the tale of the knocking. So in 2003, Chinese astronaut Yang Liwei was launched on his first mission up to the vast darkness of space. He was China's first man in space. He was sent up in a small craft all alone. Again, first time. Brave dude right here. Going up to space would be scary enough as it is, but things got creepy when Liwei started hearing something. He was in space all alone when he began hearing what sounded like a knock on the spacecraft. He described it as, quote, "someone knocking the body of the spaceship, just as knocking an iron bucket with a wooden hammer," and went on to say it neither came from outside nor inside the spaceship. He took a look outside the porthole and nothing, which was actually probably a relief. Here on Earth, if we heard a knocking sound on our door and opened it only to find there was nothing there, we'd be totally freaked out, right? But in space, probably for the best, we don't see anyone or anything. Once he returned to Earth, he tried to recreate the sound, but was never able to. It's still a mystery as to what he was hearing up there.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the docking procedure. Chris Hadfield is one of the best known astronauts of all time, and he had quite a harrowing story on his first space flight. During this flight, he and his fellow astronauts had the pleasure of somehow navigating a £250,000 shuttle towards a target on the Mir space station that was about the size of a coffee cup. Yeah, the most tense few minutes of their lives I can imagine. Chris's job was to watch and communicate the speed and range information to the pilot, which is a super important job, obviously, because it's such a precise thing. There's a time window, they have to be traveling at just the right speed, and they need to be accurate. Chris explained, quote, "if you hit Mir just a little too soft, then the spring mechanisms would bounce you off." He went on to say, quote, "if you hit Mir just a little too hard, then you would break Mir in half and kill the 3 people on board. So you've got to hit it exactly right." Yeah, definitely high stakes at this point. So when the crew is about 30 feet away, their 2 sensors start telling them completely different things. One said 32 feet and the other said 20 feet. Chris said, quote, "they're either both wrong or one of them is completely wrong." Now, what do? There's nobody to ask. If the crew on board the flight deck of the shuttle don't solve this problem in the next 30 seconds, then the whole flight is bust and done. Instead of panicking, however, Chris explained that he just went, quote, back to basics. This insanely intelligent person knew the dimensions of the docking module, so he used his thumb to help him sort of eyeball the distance through a window. I mean, that alone is just wild. Apparently, this helped him to figure out that they were 21 feet away, not 32. He used his stopwatch to figure out the math of how fast they were going, and when the thrusters should be fired, and thankfully, he was spot on. Chris finished the story by saying, quote, "It wasn't for a few minutes before one of us looked around and said, hey, we did it, we're actually here." That was a big relief of emotion on board. Yeah, I can imagine. In our number 9 spot today, we have the gas leak. In July of 1975, the Apollo Soyuz test project took place, which was a historic moment for both space travel as well as just for politics. This was the first joint spaceflight between the United States and the Soviet Union, and it marked the end of the space race. And while it started off extremely smoothly and was going well, this flight soon became known for an entirely different reason. On return, the two spacecrafts, the American one holding 3 astronauts and the Soviet one holding 2 cosmonauts, met in orbit around the Earth and docked to each other. Here the group began exchanging information, they were speaking each other's language to make communication easier, and also just as a sign of respect. Things were going amazingly considering the recent history. After 44 hours together they parted, and after a few more days they were on their descents back to Earth. During re-entry, however, a malfunction with the reaction control system, which is the system that controls the altitude, this malfunction ended up causing highly poisonous nitrogen tetroxide to enter the cabin where the American astronauts were. Thankfully, once this spacecraft landed, the cabin becomes ventilated, which gave them time to be rescued without being fatally injured. The astronauts on board were rushed to the hospital and were found to have developed a form of pneumonia that is caused from chemicals, but within weeks they all recovered and lived to tell the tale of this historic spaceflight. In our number 8 spot today, we have MER EO-23. This is the name of a mission that was part of the shuttle MER space program, which was a, quote, collaborative 11-mission space program between Russia and the United States that involved American space shuttles visiting the Russian space station MER, Russian cosmonauts flying on the shuttle, and an American astronaut flying aboard a Soyuz spacecraft to engage in long-duration expeditions aboard MER. During this mission, on February 23, 1997, a backup solid fuel oxygen canister ended up catching fire. This fire was in one module, but it quickly began to spew molten metal, and the crew on board was concerned that it could melt through the hull of the space station. Smoke began to fill the station, and the crew were forced to use respirators to continue breathing, but of course when it rains it pours, and some of the respirators were faulty and didn't supply oxygen. After burning for 14 minutes and the crew using up 3 fire extinguishers, the fire was thankfully put out. The smoke, however, remained thick for another 45 minutes. This was probably one of the most terrifying things that the crew went through, but this certainly was not the end of the road of struggles for these guys. Let me know down below in the comments if you want a part 2 of this video, and maybe we can cover the rest of what went wrong on this mission. In our number 7 spot today, we have Apollo 13. Definitely one of the most well-known space missions ever. Apollo 13 is famous for all of the most terrifying reasons. This mission was the 7th crewed mission in the Apollo space program, and it was the 3rd that was meant to land on the moon. The spacecraft launched on April 11, 1970, but the mission to land on the moon was quickly aborted 2 days into the flight after an oxygen tank in the service module failed. A, quote, routine stir of an oxygen tank ignited damaged wire insulation inside it, causing an explosion that vented the contents of both the service module's oxygen tanks to space. Without this oxygen that's needed for breathing and for generating electric power, the service module's propulsion as well as their life support systems were just unable to operate. This meant that the command module systems had to be shut down in order to conserve the resources it had left for re-entry. This meant that the crew had to transfer to the lunar module as a sort of lifeboat. The lunar module was only designed to support 2 men on the moon's surface for 2 days, so mission control had to create new procedures so that it could support 3 men for 4 days. The crew was in for some of the most difficult times, while the ground crew worked to help bring them home alive. Safe to say everyone was as stressed out as they they could possibly be. Thankfully, the crew on board the ship were returned to Earth safely, and this story, although horrifying, did wonders to restore public interest in the Apollo program. This story is one of the most famous space stories ever, thanks to the several dramatizations made about it. In our number 6 spot today, we have the STS-27 disaster. During the launch of STS-27, which took place in 1988, debris from the right solid rocket booster struck the underside of the craft, which ended up severely damaging over 700 tiles on the outside of the craft, as well as taking off one tile completely. It might not seem like a lot, but every little thing matters when you're doing something like going to space. So it's important to note that this mission was classified because of the fact that there was a surveillance satellite being launched along with it. Because of this, things had to be done a little differently, so when the crew on board sent photos of the damage back to the ground, the photos were encrypted and they were extremely low quality. Mission Control deemed the damage to be just light and shadows and told the crew to continue, much to their dismay. Once landed, it became clear that Atlantis was the single most damaged shuttle that was thankfully able to successfully land. The survival of the crew came down to basically happenstance, which is just terrifying. This was only the second mission after the disaster of the Challenger, so should this one have gone fatal, we likely wouldn't have seen the continuation of the program. In our number 5 spot today, we have the organic object. Leland Melvin is an American engineer and retired NASA astronaut who served on board the space shuttle Atlantis as a mission specialist. He is an incredibly brilliant man with an incredible resume, and that is exactly why this story is so unnerving. He claimed that while on a space mission as he was orbiting Earth, which for the record, how cool would it be able to tell a story like that? You're just orbiting Earth. While he was on this mission, he saw a quote alien-like organic object. NASA disputed his claims and said that what he saw was just ice, but I feel like I trust the person who actually saw it with their own eyes. Leland went on to write that whatever he saw was quote translucent, curved, organic looking. I have no explanations to offer, but I will say it certainly is interesting and a little bit terrifying. In our number 4 spot today, we have the space snake. Dr. Franklin Story Musgrave is an American physician and retired NASA astronaut, and considering how credible he tends to be, despite the absurdities of this story, it makes it hard to pass off as a lie so easily. While he was in space, he claims that he saw something that I don't wish upon anyone, a sort of space snake. He said that he saw an 8-foot-long white snake floating through space. I don't even know what I would do. Probably cry, call Houston, I'm not sure. There are many people who think that this was simply just a detached hose from the spaceship, but Dr. Musgrave remains adamant on what he saw, and to be completely honest, I kinda believe him. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. I mean, I don't know what happens in space, but I find it hard to believe that this person, who would likely be familiar with the parts of a spacecraft, mistook a hose for a snake. In our number 3 spot today, we have the lights. Leroy Chiao was the commander of the ISS in 2005, and this is exactly when this strange sighting occurred. It is said that he wasn't the only one who witnessed this though, as it is said that the entire crew was there to see this unexplainable occurrence along with him. Basically, they saw a strange set of lights while up in space. He went on to describe the lights and said that they were in the formation of an upside down V, and that they ended up stumbling upon this bizarre situation after the formation flew past them. I'm just gonna say it, we're all thinking it, it sounds a lot like aliens. I just don't have any other possible explanations, and you're telling me that the whole crew saw it? I swear, nothing will convince me more of aliens than an astronaut's first-hand account. In our number 2 spot today, we have glowing green. Gordon Cooper is a well-known astronaut after having flown the Mercury 9 and the Gemini 5, and in fact he was the last American to spend time in space alone. But despite all these exciting accolades, I want to take you to May 15th, 1963. Here he was sent off to space in a Mercury capsule for a 22-orbit journey around the Earth, and while on this journey he saw something very unsettling, a glowing green object that would approach his capsule. During his final orbit, he did tell the tracking station of this object that was quickly approaching his capsule, and they were able to pick up this UFO on their radar, but once Cooper landed, reporters were told that he was not allowed to answer questions regarding this UFO. It's even more interesting considering how Gordon has been a vocal and firm believer in UFOs, so I ask, What do you guys think it was? In our number 1 spot today we have space music. After 4 days of space travel in 1969, the Apollo 10 astronauts, Tom Stafford, Gene Cernan, and John Young, were on the far side of the moon. We were full of curiosity over what the other side could possibly be containing, but it wasn't necessarily the discovery people were expecting. While the astronauts were taking photographs and experiencing this new to humans area, they began to hear some otherworldly music coming from their headsets, and this continued for 1 full hour. Gene is said to have exclaimed, "Boy, that sure is weird music, we're gonna have to find out about that," while John replied, "Nobody will believe us." For decades this space music was left a complete mystery until just recently when an explanation was put forward. It is being claimed that perhaps this sound emanated from radio interference between spacecrafts. While this is a fairly reasonable explanation, not everyone is exactly convinced. Starting off in our number 10 spot we have life on Mars. This is a legend that's been around for quite some time, especially since the 1970s when the Viking 1 and 2 were launched. This legend basically suggests that there is, or at least was, alien life on Mars, and that NASA knows about it, but they are just keeping the little secret to themselves. Like all space conspiracies, this legend ranges from some pretty out there but still based in reality ideas, all the way to absolutely absurd tinfoil hat vibes. What I mean is that some believe this is true because they claim to see alien fossils in the photos of the surface of Mars that we have. There are others who think that maybe NASA just isn't searching for signs of alien life at all. And then there are those who think that Mars is actually fully inhabited by like half alien, half human creatures and NASA's just hiding that from us. I'll let you decide on this one. In our number 9 spot today we have X-37B. So I guess this one is more like a NASA mystery rather than an urban legend, but basically they sent a space shuttle up, but no one knows exactly what it's for. Throughout the last few years, an X-37B spacecraft has gone on a number of different missions up into the orbit of Earth, but no one is willing to spill the beans on what these missions are aimed at doing. Of course, like with any legend, the theories are abound. Some people believe the purpose of these missions is to test out new technology. Very reasonable, but there are others out there who think that these missions are meant to destroy different satellites, or that this craft is really some kind of space weapon, but only time will tell if all of the secrets of the craft ever get declassified. In our number 8 spot today we have the live stream. This is an urban legend that stems from an ISS live stream a few years ago. Back in 2016, alien enthusiasts and UFO watchers noticed as they watched a live stream that was being broadcast from the ISS two objects that seemed to be entering Earth's atmosphere. These objects were unidentified and they looked like they were tumbling toward Earth, so many people took this image to be UFOs. To only add more fuel to the fire shortly after these objects could be seen, the live stream was cut off abruptly. NASA swears that this was merely just a coincidence, and while that is possible, not everyone is convinced that's the case. In our number 7 spot today we have changes. Okay, other than those who have been to space, who's to say what experiencing something like that would do to just your entire outlook on life, and especially your mental health. I mean, on one hand it's gotta be one of the most incredible experiences, but on the other side it would be terrifying and probably kind of lonely. Spending weeks and sometimes even months in the vast darkness of space, as amazing as it sounds, it likely isn't for the faint of heart. That is exactly why this NASA legend suggests that many of the astronauts who have been to space have returned with changes in their behavior, and apparently NASA has done everything they can to deny this. It is said that there is a psychologist who has worked with many NASA employees who actually went on to criticize the agency for denying that these behavioral changes existed, and she even suggested that they be looked into and researched more because she believes it goes deeper than any of us may even realize. This would include more in-depth screening both before and after the missions. This legend is likely to have developed in 2007 after former astronaut Lisa Nowak was arrested for harming someone, to which she pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. In our number 6 spot today we have the Mystery House. You may or may not have heard about the Mystery House that was seen on the moon in November of last year. This mysterious object was spotted by the U-2 rover, but at the time this rover was at such a distance it needed time to get there to check it out. Months later, when the rover arrived, it was released that it was in fact just a weird shaped rock, but not everyone is convinced, and legend has it, this just may be a cover-up for what this mystery house really is. Of course, people believe that this mysterious object likely has some sort of alien or extraterrestrial origin, despite what researchers are saying. In our number 5 spot today we have space signals. It is no secret that NASA has been tracking and looking into a ton of mysterious radio signals referred to as fast radio bursts that have been detected in space. Some of these signals we have been able to find the source of, but some have been plaguing the minds of scientists everywhere since they were first discovered. Legend has it, however, that NASA knows exactly where these signals are coming from, and of course it's aliens, but they just don't want to tell us. What do you think? Do you think NASA would keep aliens a secret from us, or is this just some space conspiracy sort of stuff? Let us know down below in the comments. In our number 4 spot today we have black holes. Of course, black holes are one of the most terrifying and mysterious parts of space, and while we know they exist, we really don't know much else about them. Of course, people and researchers will try to get a closer glimpse at them and maybe even try and take matters into their own hands and attempt to recreate the conditions of a black hole right here on Earth. The world's largest particle accelerator, the Large Hadron Collider, or LHC, which has been credited with proving the existence of the Higgs boson particle, is part of the source of another space legend, and that has to do with the idea that NASA is creating their own black hole. Some believe this project is intentional, while others just worry about it becoming a reality accidentally. It's true that if this were to happen it would be bad news, but luckily this probably isn't very likely and may not even be possible. In our number 3 spot today we have secrets. Of course, NASA knows a lot more than the average person would when it comes to the likely fate of our planet. I mean, they know a lot more about the planet than the average person, and tell me this, when was the last time you even looked through a telescope? It's just safe to say they are better briefed on all of the cosmic horrors that threaten our planet. We are definitely more well versed with the disasters that we may face here on the planet, but when it comes to threats that sit thousands of light years away, well, we definitely aren't the experts. That is the basis for this theory or legend that should NASA find out that we are facing some sort of humanity-destroying space threat, that they wouldn't even tell us. NASA would likely know about a life-altering asteroid collision long before it happened, but some people think that even if they had the time to warn us, they just wouldn't. And it doesn't even stop at the usual threat like an asteroid. This belief includes things like pieces of space junk, an alien invasion, the sun burning us alive. Really, as wild as you can get, people think NASA would just keep it all a secret. In our number 2 spot today we have preparations. On July 20th, 1969, President Nixon made a call that would rack up some astronomically large long-distance charges when he called the Apollo 11 astronauts who were, at the time, on the moon. He of course wanted to congratulate them on this incredible achievement, but as it turns out, he maybe wasn't all that confident that the mission was going to be successful. His former speechwriter let it slip that there was in fact an emergency broadcast script that had been written should the mission have gone south. The speech was later leaked, and it said, quote, "Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace. These brave men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, know that there is no hope for their recovery, but know that there is hope for mankind in their sacrifice." I know everyone's got to have a contingency plan, but if I was one of those astronauts, it would be a little bit chilling to have heard about the words that were prepared in the case that you were just being left out in space forever. In our number 1 spot today we have stuck. Recently, on a Space Legends myth list, we talked about the Fisher space pen, and today we are talking about how it relates to another NASA legend. Basically, Nixon almost did have to use that speech he had prepared, because following the historic moonwalk, Aldrin and Armstrong discovered that a 1-inch engine arm circuit breaker switch had broken off the instrument panel. This was an integral part of getting the engine to ignite so that they would be able to make it back home, so rightfully so, they were pretty terrified. The broken switch was reported to Mission Control, but by the next morning they still didn't have a solution. Aldrin explained that, quote, "After examining it more closely, I thought that if I could find something in the LM to push into the circuit, it might hold. But since it was electrical, I decided not to put my finger in or use anything that had metal on the end." This is where the legend comes in. People claimed that he used one of the Fisher space pens to help him fix this broken switch, but that isn't entirely true. It wasn't a Fisher pen, but he did use one that had a felt tip. Aldrin said, quote, "I had a felt-tipped pen in the shoulder pocket of my suit that might do the job. He went on to explain, quote, after moving the countdown procedure up by a couple of hours in case it didn't work, I inserted the pen into the small opening where the circuit breaker switch should have been and pushed it in. Sure enough, the circuit breaker held. We were going to get off the moon after all. To this day, I still have the broken circuit breaker switch and the felt-tipped pen I used to ignite our engines. If this didn't work, it is very likely that these astronauts would have been stuck on the moon. This was indeed a very serious problem that could have gone a much different way.
In our number 10 spot, we have an alien interaction. Have you ever come across someone that so clearly lied but they tried to cover it up with a joke? Or perhaps they were so clearly telling the truth and they decided to mask it as it's a joke. Well, that could very well be the case for astronaut Scott Kelly, except I'm not quite sure if he was masking the truth with his words. I'll let you decide. Apparently, Scott Kelly spent quite a lot of time on the International Space Station. He is known as the astronaut that has stayed the longest in the space station. Scott has apparently made a few UFO/alien jokes in his time that has raised some eyebrows. At one point, he was quoted as saying that aliens have it easier in space than we do. First off, that is not a joke. If he thinks that's a joke, I think we need to sign him up for a class at Second City. But second, excuse me sir, but what does that mean? Have you seen aliens in space seemingly live comfortably? Was he told to say that he was joking because he could have revealed a top secret if he elaborated? Possibly. If you're liking this video, don't forget to subscribe for good vibes and more content like this. In our number 9 spot, we have UFO footage. Here is some crazy footage that NASA has dismissed. It's so clear that there's something going on here, and the complete disregard for crazy footage like this truly makes you feel like, what else are they keeping from us? In 2020, Russian cosmonaut Ivan Wagner made a time-lapse video while orbiting space, and he claimed to have found something. Space guests, he called them. In his video, you see the curved edge of the Earth at night with a green swirl of the aura moving across the surface and several falling stars. It's such a cool video to see. Then about 9 seconds in, you see a fleet of 5 possible UFOs. He said that because it's in a time-lapse format, you can't measure how long they were there, but it was for about 50 seconds real time. This video is so nuts. I'm so happy that this astronaut decided to share this with the world. At least we know that some of them are on a quest for truth and are not keeping us from seeing crazy evidence. In our number 8 spot, we have new planets. Not too long ago, it was released to the public that a possible batch of Earth-sized planets were discovered, and apparently 3 of them could possibly support human life. Yeah, my mind is blown too. Some scientists are on board with the evidence and some are dismissing it, which makes it confusing to us little guys that don't know what's going on and really just want to know if aliens exist or not. Let's be real. We've been kept out of important discoveries before only to have seen evidence years later when they've been declassified. People believe that's what will happen in this case. Perhaps not only were these planets discovered, but possibly alien life as well. These planets have been called the TRAPPIST-1 planets, and the whole discovery just feels fishy to me, as if people are dismissing the evidence to cause confusion so that no one knows what's real and are distracted by the confusion. In our number 7 spot, we have the flat Earth theory. Many people believe that the spherical Earth is a lie and that NASA has been faking the whole thing. They believe that all of the photos of the globe are photoshopped for financial gain. I'm not sure I'm on board with this one, but let's discuss why people think this is a lie. It is believed that it would cost much less to fake a space program than to actually have one, and the funding that NASA gets goes to the people behind the sham. Whoa, imagine. NASA has thousands of employees though, so logically it would be pretty hard to fake it from that many people. Unless of course you had everyone work on projects that are top secret and they aren't allowed to tell their coworkers what they're working on. Like I said, not sure I'm fully on board with NASA lying about this one, but if this lie were proven to be real, there would probably be some kind of civil war, because I bet people would be aliens.
Gordon Cooper. Leroy Gordon Cooper, Jr. He's an American aerospace engineer fighter, test pilot, US Air Force pilot, you name it. And he's the youngest of the 7 original astronauts in Project Mercury, aka the first human space program of the United States. Not too shabby. In Cooper's autobiography, Leap of Faith, he recounts his experiences with the
Hence the pasta name. Gosh, I hate when unedible things are named after food. It's just wrong. Hearing them just makes me hungry and it sucks. But anyways, thinking of a leftover star forming to create a sort of space pasta is pretty cool. I feel like that could be the premise of a fun children's book. If you turn this into a book, I don't care about the copyright rights, just dedicate the book to me and thank me for being an idea guy. In our number 7 spot, we have Tabby's star. A star has been found, but this isn't any normal star. This is a star that apparently dips in and out of brightness at irregular intervals and for unusual lengths of time, apparently up to a 22% dimming in brightness. The Tabby star was discovered by astronomer Tabitha Boyajian of Louisiana State University. People have debated over what the heck is going on here. Why is it dimming so much? And some of the theories I am definitely on board for, like the idea of an alien megastructure. What a cool thought. The most popular theory is that it's really just a large ring of dust that's causing the dimming. Nah, that theory sucks. Alien megastructure for the telescopes. In our number 4 spot, we have the moon Hyperion. A lot of astronomers have said that the weirdest moon that has been discovered so far is Jupiter's moon, which is called Hyperion. Hyperion is truly a weird shape, not quite round like our moon, and it's full of craters. It looks like a rock that you might find on the beach that you throw into the water because it doesn't look as pretty as the more colorful rock. Am I right, or am I right, or am I right? Apparently it has a very chaotic rotation. Its axis of rotation apparently wobbles so much that its orientation in space is unpredictable. It is also known to be composed largely of water ice. Only a small amount of it is actually rock. Interesting. In our number 3 spot, we have high energy neutrino. NASA's Fermi telescope helped astronomers discover something miraculous on September 22nd, 2017. They identified a monster black hole in a far-off galaxy as the source of a high-energy neutrino that was projected at this planet, planet Earth, and seen by the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory. Apparently it hit the Antarctic ice with energy of about 300 trillion electron volts. For perspective, that is more than 45 times the energy achievable by the most powerful particle accelerator on Earth. Well, to think that this had no effect on humanity at all would be a serious lack of understanding how everything in life affects one another. To know that the gravitational pull of the moon affects the tides in the ocean is to know that this energy strike absolutely affected us somehow, whether we understand it or not. I scrolled back and saw that I did get my Reiki license that day, so no wonder I feel magic in my blood. It was the neutrino particles from galaxies away. Even though it hit Antarctica and not Canada, but we're on the same planet, so whatever, it fits my narrative and I'm sticking to it. Coming up in our number 2 spot, we have a strange galaxy. In 2016, astronomers discovered a new galaxy that was called an ultra-diffuse galaxy because it's as big as a galaxy like the Milky Way, but its stars are spread out thinly. It was called the DG-SAT-1. It is strange because unlike most other galaxies, this one was sitting all alone. It was a loner. Others are typically found in clusters. It has also been said that it seems to be an object formed in a different era of the universe, approximately 1 billion or so years after the Big Bang. Some think DG-SAT is a living fossil. Interesting. In our number 1 spot today, we have the cosmic cliffs of the Carina Nebula. In a very recent broadcast at NASA headquarters, NASA released new photos from the James Webb Space Telescope that has helped astrologers gather data that they never had before. There was one picture in particular that was of the cosmic cliffs of the Carina Nebula. With this picture, astronomers were able to see brand new stars that were completely hidden before. The host spoke about how by looking at the photo you get a sense of depth and texture. They also discovered over 100 or more new stars, bubbles and cavities and jets that are being blown out by these newborn stars, galaxies, lurking in the background of this picture. They saw structures that have never been seen before that have left them puzzled as well. The cliffs of Carina Nebula are extremely strange but beautiful to look at.
Coming in at number 10 is Vladimir Komarov. Vladimir Komarov was the first astronaut who died directly in space. This was the first mission of the Soviet Soyuz 1 spacecraft on the 23rd of April 1967. Komarov was supposed to test the ship name in manned mode and conduct the world's first docking in space with another Soyuz 2 spacecraft. However, the plan never succeeded and Komarov became the first astronaut lost in space. After the launch of the Soyuz 1 spacecraft, spacecraft into orbit, one of the two solar panels did not open, and the spacecraft began to lack electricity for the correct system operations. Komarov tried to open the panel by spinning the ship around its axis, but this did not help. Due to the malfunction, the launch of Soyuz 2 was cancelled and the flight of Soyuz 1 was terminated ahead of schedule. The spacecraft successfully deorbited, but after re-entry for unknown reasons, the parachute system failed. As a result, the descent vehicle hit the ground at a fast speed, which resulted in the astronauts' instant death. As a result, the parachute system was modified and the shortcomings were eliminated. Number 9. Hylian myth. Even though Komarov's death is considered to be the starting point of space travel deaths, there is a myth that he was not the first astronaut lost in space. An American science fiction writer, Robert Heinlein, claimed that a similar incident took place even before Gagarin's flight into space. On May 15, 1990, the USSR launched the Vostok 1 1KP prototype into orbit. The goal was to test the altitude control systems, and the declaration After depressurization, severe pain throughout the body, and loss of hearing due to burst eardrums, the astronauts did not immediately establish the cause of the leak and simply did not have enough time to save themselves. Number 4. Valentin Bonarenko. Valentin Bonarenko was a Soviet fighter pilot selected in 1960 for training as a cosmonaut. During a 15-day endurance experiment in a low-pressure altitude chamber with at least 50% oxygen atmosphere, Bondarenko, having completed work for the day, removed monitoring biosensors from his body and washed his skin with an alcohol-soaked cotton ball, which he then discarded. The cotton ball landed on an electric hot plate, which he was using to brew a cup of tea. The cotton ignited, and Bonarenko tried to smother the flames with the sleeve of his woolen coveralls, which caught fire in the chamber's oxygen-rich atmosphere. Because of the pressure difference, it took a watching doctor nearly half an hour to open the chamber door. Bonarenko's clothing was burned until almost all the oxygen in the chamber was used up, and he had suffered third-degree burns over most of his body. The attending physician at Botkin Hospital, surgeon and traumatologist Vladimir Golahowski, recalled in 1984 that while attempting to start an intravenous drip, the only blood vessels he could find for inserting a needle were on the soles of his feet, where his flight boots had warded off the flames. The Soviet government concealed the death along with Bonarenko's membership of the Cosmonaut Corps until 1880, and a crater on the moon's far side is now named after him. Number 3. Columbia Space Shuttle crash. On the 1st of February 2003, the second space shuttle crash occurred. Shuttle Columbia was returning to Earth after 16 days of flight. Approximately 16 minutes before the expected landing, communication with the crew was interrupted. Eyewitnesses filmed the burning wreckage of the shuttle flying at an altitude of about 63 kilometers. All 7 astronauts were lost in space. They were Rick Husband, William C. McCool, Elon Ramon, Michael P. Anderson, Kampla Chawla, David M. Brown, and Laurel Clark. As the investigation showed, the cause of the disaster was a breakdown that arose back at the start. About 82 seconds into the flight, a piece of insulation detached from the left fairing, which struck the carbon fiber panel of the Columbia's left wing and probably left a hole in the thermal insulation layer. Because of this, after entering the dense layers of the atmosphere, the leading edge of the left wing began to heat up more than usual, and the wing began to collapse, and after it, the shuttle itself collapsed. Notably, incidents with detached pieces of thermal insulation from the shuttles were observed before, but tests shows that they do not pose a threat to the astronauts. Losing Columbia became a turning point in the space shuttle program, and the shuttle astronaut flights were interrupted for several years, and in 2011, the program was finally closed due to the high risk of astronauts' lives. Number 2. Spaceship Two. On October 31st, 2014, another astronaut was lost in space. It was Michael Ellsbury, the pilot of the suborbital spacecraft Spaceship Two of Virgin Galactic. During the 55th test flight of the ship, serious anomalies were discovered, which led to the spacecraft crash. The cause was called crew error. The pilots unblocked the tail section of the vehicle ahead of time without gaining the necessary speed, and also did not perform the necessary actions to transfer the tail section to a vertical position. As a result, the ship began to rotate around its axis and then fell apart. The wreckage was scattered all over a radius of 8 kilometers. First pilot Michael Ellsbury was killed, but co-pilot Peter Sebold managed to eject. The pilot astronaut survived but was seriously injured. Fortunately, the failure did not become fatal for the Richard Branson Company. Virgin Galactic worked out its bugs, and in July 2021 carried out the first ever suborbital tourist spaceflight, ushering the area of space tourism. And coming in at number 1 is the Space Shuttle Challenger. In the 1980s, the era of space shuttles began, which finally established US supremacy in space. These were reusable rocket planes that made a real revolution in space tech, but still were not without significant shortcomings, which eventually became the cause of the biggest space travel disasters. Due to scheduling issues with what had been called GO fever, STS-51L launched in suboptimal temperatures on January 28, 1986. The cold weather weakened the O-rings that sealed each section of the tall, white, solid rocket booster segments and prevented the exhaust gases from shooting out of any direction but down. The seals failed over approximately 26 degrees of the arc on the starboard side of the SRB and the lowest of 4 segment joints. Exhaust flames escaped through the breach, pushing the SRB into the large rust-colored external tank. The starboard off strut then connected the SRB to the ET was pushed into the hydrogen tank, which shot up through the intertank into the oxygen tank. This destroyed the ET structure entirely. The orbiter survived this event, but because of its orientation to the free flow aerodynamic forces, quickly disintegrated the orbiter. The crew compartment survived the breakup, and when recovered, it was was discovered that several switches had been moved from their launch normal positions, indicating that the crew was conscious for some time after the breakup and tried to recover. The crew compartment impacted the ocean surface at a terminal velocity which was far too fast to survive, and all 7 members of the crew passed away. These members were F. Richard Scorby, Michael J. Smith, Ronald McNair, Elson Orzinka, Judith Resnick, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McClough. To this day, it is still unknown whether the astronauts were conscious at the time of impact, although it's judged unlikely.
In our number 7 spot, we have enormous babies. There have been many reports from NASA employees of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin seeing aliens when they first arrived on the moon. Even though Buzz and Neil deny it, I'm sure they have been told to deny it, if you know what I mean. A former NASA employee by the name of Otto Binder bypassed NASA's broadcasting and picked up the following being said. NASA, what's there, Apollo 11? Response, these babies are huge, sir. Enormous. Oh my god. You wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecraft out there, lined up on the far side of the crater edge. They're on the moon watching us. Apparently, off the record, the astronauts have admitted to many scientists that they did indeed see something. Yeah, I believe it. It's silly to think that there is nothing out there. That's just, human ego, I think, to believe that we are the only intelligent life. That mixed with human fear. In our number 3 spot, we have the cylindrical object. Allegedly, in 1991, a cosmonaut by the name of Musa Menarov caught a cylindrical object on film that he believed to be a UFO. The object was shiny, and in the film it swivels and flies across space. Originally, Musa thought it was something off the ship, but then after further investigation, nothing was missing from the ship. So after further reflection on seeing it and, looking back at the footage, he's convinced it was some kind of UFO ship or UFO device. What's with all the UFO objects that are so shiny? Do you think this is a UFO? Or perhaps is it something from another planet? Let us know in the comment section below. Coming up in our number 2 spot, we have the mystery hut. The ending to this made me lol so hard that I had to include it. A mystery hut was discovered by China's astronauts and people operating their U-2 moon rover. This rover was making its way through the northwestern part of the moon when it was discovered. On the camera, a cube-shaped mystery hut was captured. This was only in November of 2021. It created a spectacle. Had moon people finally been discovered? Everyone was asking themselves. By January 2022, the rover was much closer, and what did it find? Oh, just a small piece of space rock on a crater rim. The drama. Ooh, look, a mystery hut. Probably the moon men reside there. 1 month later, alas, it is a rock. Humans are funny.
Number 10. Low gravity doesn't affect your bones and muscles. We know that humans do just fine in Earth's gravity. On the other hand, we know that human bones and muscles can atrophy terribly in zero gravity, as seen in experiments on the International Space Station. Astronauts on the ISS have to exercise for 2 hours a day to prevent muscle loss, but their bones still lose calcium over time, and they don't recover until they come back to Earth. Adding to this, we don't know how the human body will react on Mars, where gravity is only about 0.38 the strength of Earth. Many people have long assumed that humans can survive just fine in Martian gravity. It'll be just like Earth, only we can jump a little higher, but we don't actually know this for a fact. It might turn out that low Martian gravity is just as bad for human health as zero gravity. Mars's low gravity may also erode other capabilities that are crucial for everyday functioning. For instance, NASA has found that eyesight can mysteriously deteriorate in zero gravity. Astronaut John Phillips went from a perfect 20/20 to 2100 after just 6 months aboard the ISS. Astronauts also find it harder to sleep in zero gravity, and many passengers in space suffer from insomnia. Number 9. Space Shuttle Challenger astronauts died instantly. On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart 73 seconds into its flight and ended
ended the lives of all 7 crew members instantly. The spacecraft disintegrated 46,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Cape Canaveral, Florida at 11:39 a.m. It was the first fatal accident involving an American spacecraft in flight. It was thought that all the astronauts passed away instantly, but it was revealed decades later that some, if not all of the astronauts survived the initial explosion, as the cockpit cabin had enough protection to not be breached. For 2 minutes and 45 seconds, they were awake and aware as they plummeted towards the Atlantic Ocean, which is terrifying. Understandably, NASA knew that the news of their terrifying death would have crippled the space program even more than it already was, so they kept this a secret. I'm gonna be honest, I do understand their reasoning for this, but it's just sad. Number 8. The sun is a big ball of fire. Okay, so this isn't all NASA's fault, but despite what you've been led to believe, the sun is not a ball of fire. There isn't any fire in the sun. Fire requires oxygen, and the sun is composed mostly of helium and hydrogen. In fact, the heat from the sun comes from something called nuclear fusion. The pressure and temperature in the sun's core causes the hydrogen atoms to fuse together into helium atoms. This process gives off the intense heat and light of the sun. People, including scientists, sometimes say that the sun burns hydrogen to make it glow, but that is just a figure of speech. Hydrogen really doesn't burn, it fuses into helium. Also, the sun itself is white, which means it contains all the colors in the visible spectrum. The sun appears orangish yellow because of the blue light it emits has a shorter wavelength and is scattered in the atmosphere, which is the same process that makes the sky appear blue. Number 7. Mars is the only other habitable planet. It's been said that Mars is the only other habitable planet, but that's not true. Kepler 186f is the first rocky exoplanet to be found within the habitable zone, as the region around the host star has the temperature that is right for liquid water. This planet is also very close in size to Earth. While planets have previously been found in the habitable zone, they are at least 40% larger in size than Earth, and understanding their makeup is challenging. Kepler 186f is more reminiscent of Earth. Although the size of Kepler 186f is known, its mass and composition are not. Previous research, however, suggests that a planet the size of Kepler 186f is likely to be rocky. Even though we may not find out about what's going on at the surface of this planet anytime soon, it's a strong reminder of why new technologies are being developed that will enable scientists to get a closer look at distant worlds, but we still have a lot to learn. So maybe one day the human race will be living on Kepler 186f. Number 6. Your rocket won't blow up before leaving Earth. Yeah, your rocket can actually explode before you even leave Earth. For example, Elon Musk's plan to go to Mars involves strapping a giant spaceship atop the biggest rocket that humanity has ever built. Because any rocket launch basically involves a long, controlled explosion, no matter how many safety tests are done beforehand, there is always a risk. If anything goes wrong, if the explosion gets out of control, the people strapped in that big container of fuel don't stand a chance. For context, NASA's Space Shuttle program carried 833 passengers between 1981 and 2011. Of those, 14 people died in explosions in 2 high-profile accidents, a fatality rate of 1.6%. That's more dangerous than driving, and it's even a bit riskier than climbing Mount Everest. Some of SpaceX's smaller Falcon 9 rockets have either exploded on the launch pad or blown up mid-flight as well, so safe to say getting to space is just as dangerous as being there. Number 5. Extended space travel doesn't affect DNA. It's not true. Astronaut Scott Kelly, who spent a year at the International Space Station in 2016, returned to find out that he was 2 inches taller than his departing height. The new physical differences between Scott and his identical twin brother, Mike, also an astronaut, were startling. Scientists compared the DNA of the two and found that besides growing 2 inches, Scott's gut bacteria were completely different and his gene expression had changed. Scientists concluded that the changes were caused by the stresses of space travel, which can cause changes in a cell's biological pathways. Although Scott eventually returned to his original height, his other genetic changes are seemingly irreversible, meaning Scott and his brother are no longer identical twins, which is insane. Number 4. You can only see the Great Wall of China from space. It's been said that the only man-made structure you can see from space is the Great Wall of China, but the visible wall theory was shaken after China's own astronaut, Yang Lui, said he couldn't see the historic structure. There was
was even talk about rewriting textbooks that supported the theory, a formidable task in Earth's most populous nation. The issue surfaced again after photos taken by Leroy Chiao from the International Space Station were determined to show small sections of the wall in Inner Mongolia about 200 miles north of Beijing. A photo was taken of it, but it wasn't the only thing seen. For years it's been said that the Great Wall of China is the only structure to be seen from space, but that isn't true. From the ISS about 250 miles up, you can see the Great Wall along with numerous other man-made structures, but it's definitely not the most visible imprint of man on our planet. Number 3. Space isn't dangerous. We all know that accidents happen and things can go wrong, but it seems like NASA never told their astronauts how bad things could get. Astronaut Scott Perinsky had to install a new module on the ISS that would serve as a node for the addition of future research laboratories. Part of the mission required changing the location of an array of solar panels. Things were going along really well until the crew inside commanded these large solar panels to extend. They got jammed up and the panels began to tear. It was unsafe to continue to extend this panel any further, and you couldn't retract it either. There was concern that if the astronauts even tried to undock the space shuttle, it might rip apart and hit the shuttle. After 72 hours of grueling work on the ground, NASA came up with a plan. Scott would have to travel further away from safety of an airlock than had ever been previously attempted. It wasn't only the distance that was nerve-wracking, as Scott explained, there was a real danger that we could do even worse damage to the space station. Then there was the potential risk to myself, because if there was any metal-to-metal connection with the solar panel or arcing, it could actually electrocute me or cause ignition in the 100% oxygen in my suit. All the tools I was working with had to be specially insulated. The metal parts of my spacesuit had to be wrapped in special tape, he said. Thankfully, everything worked out and the mission was a success. Scott has said, "I still to this day think it's one of NASA's greatest accomplishments, but it's crazy that he had to go through that." Number 2. There's no life on the moon. When astronaut Neil Armstrong took a walk on the moon and became the first man to do so in 1969, many conspiracy theories came to light. For one, people claimed he didn't actually go to the moon and that the footage was recorded in a studio. Of the many conspiracy theories surrounding this moment, there's one that remains a mystery to date. During the Apollo 11 mission, after Neil landed on the moon, NASA claims to have lost transmission for roughly 2 minutes. And in a reportedly secret message to NASA, Neil said, "These babies were huge, sir. Enormous. Oh god, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecrafts out here lined up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon watching us." Yep, seems like Neil encountered some aliens, and I'm sure they never prepared him for that. And coming in at number 1 is the effects space has on you emotionally. Being in space is scary. Your safety is at risk both physically and emotionally. Astronaut Chris Hadfield said sometimes we hear pings as tiny rocks hit our spaceship, and also the creaks and snaps of expanding metal as we go in and out of sunlight. The solar panels are full with tiny holes from the micrometeorites. I watched a large meteorite burn up between me and Australia, and to think that the hypersonic dumb lump of rock randomly hurtling into us instead sent a shiver up my back. Besides that, going to space can cause a lot of psychological issues like anxiety or depression. When actor William Shatner went up to space, he said this of his experience: "Everything I had thought was wrong. Everything I had expected to see was wrong. I had thought that going into space would be the ultimate catharsis of that connection I had been looking for between all living things, that being up there would be the next beautiful step to understanding the harmony of the universe. I discovered that the beauty isn't out there, it's down here with all of us. Leaving that behind made my connection to our tiny planet even more profound. It was among the strongest feelings of grief I have ever encountered. The contrast between the vicious coldness of space and the warm nurturing of Earth below me filled with overwhelming sadness. I learned later that I was not alone in this feeling. It is called the overview effect and is not uncommon among astronauts, including Yuri Gagarin, Michael Collins, Sally Ride, and many others. Essentially, when someone travels to space and views Earth from orbit, a sense of the planet's fragility takes hold. I cannot imagine the feelings of experiencing this, and it honestly sounds traumatizing.
We're going to start off the list with a very spooky piece of audio picked up during the Apollo 10 mission in 1969. But before you hear it, just going to give you a little preamble. The team was orbiting the moon testing various equipment when Gene Cernan piloting the lunar module, heard something strange. It was an eerie, whistling, whooshing kind of sound. He asked two of his fellow astronauts, John Young and Tom Stafford, if they heard it as well. They all agreed it was a strange noise, saying how it sounded spacey, like space music. So give it a listen.
You hear that whistling sound?
Definitely a creepy thing to hear while floating around in the vastness of space. As if floating around in the vastness of space isn't freaky enough as it is. What do you think of this though? Is it just some kind of technological feedback? Could aliens have been communicating with them? Share your thoughts down below. And don't forget, while you're sharing those thoughts, to like and subscribe as well. We got videos coming at you on the daily. Next up, we have the Cosmos 1408 accident. The Cosmos 1408 is a Russian satellite, or more accurately, it was a Soviet Union satellite launched in 1982 that operated for a couple years before becoming inactive. It was still floating around in orbit up until 2021, when it was destroyed by a Russian anti-satellite weapon test. But the thing is, the obliteration of this satellite caused this mass of space debris that posed a real threat to the International Space Station. At the time of this incident, there were 7 crew aboard the ISS, and this cloud of debris was flying through orbit above the ISS, intersecting with its orbit every 93 minutes. There was a real danger here, a bunch of space junk colliding with a space station, not terribly safe. So Mission Control contacted the crew, told them, you guys gotta put your spacesuits on and take shelter in the escape crew capsules just in case the debris smashes into the station. Now, everything turned out to be fine, and at this point there are only about 300 pieces of the initial 1,800 still in orbit, but still, this would have been quite a fright. Pieces of an exploded satellite might smash into the station, guys, so throw on your spacesuits, hop in the escape pods, and hope for the best. Next on the list, we have a series of strange lights spotted by astronaut Leroy Chiao. In 2005, Leroy Chiao, the commander of the International Space Station, saw something pretty incredible during a spacewalk. It was a pretty routine day. He was working outside the ISS doing whatever it is astronauts do up there when he noticed a formation of lights. He described the lights as being arranged in a line and compared the formation to like almost an upside down check mark. They seemed to be a structured and deliberate arrangement of lights rather than random or natural phenomena. So what were these lights? Was it reflections from debris, aliens? Well, there's no concrete evidence, but one thing is for sure, it wasn't just his mind playing tricks on him, because the rest of the crew saw the lights as well. Next up, we have the Alan Bean sighting. Alan Bean, a NASA astronaut, reported seeing something oddly shiny on the moon, something he described looking like shoe leather. What could this shiny thing have been? Bean suggested it might have been similar to glass, but really had no idea. Ever since he mentioned this, people have taken the shiny object idea and like really ran with it, talking about possible leftovers from alien technology on the moon or something like that. Really, there's no solid explanation for what he saw. The term shoe leather doesn't exactly clarify what this shiny object could have been. Was it a reflection of something, a natural element? Could have been human-made material left behind as well. Next, we have the UFO. During the Apollo 16 mission, astronauts John Young, Thomas Mattingly, and Charles Duke were heading back from the moon when they filmed about 4 seconds of footage. In the video, there's a saucer-like object floating above the lunar surface. It looks like your classic UFO, the type you'd see in a 50s B movie or something. Footage was taken from a 16mm motion picture camera shooting at 12 frames per second from the window of the command service module. Now, they didn't realize what they'd captured on camera until after the mission, otherwise they'd have probably lost control of the vessel. It's one thing to think you saw something weird in the sky when your feet are like firmly planted on the ground, on Earth, but seeing one while you're floating through space, that would be a whole other story. You're in their territory. Some of you may not know this, but it's not just human beings that have left Earth's atmosphere. There are tons of animals that have been launched into space, and many of them never made it back. So there are a number of US and Soviet ships still floating in orbit, with the remains of dogs and chimps still inside of them. And some of them are said to still be seen time to time. These animals being sent up into space was referred to by NASA as the Albert Project. Soviet and US governments were putting all they had into the space race. It was one of the most intense competitions in history, it has to be. And because there was so much on the line, and sending human beings up into space without having worked out all the kinks was pretty dangerous, they decided to send up animals first instead. Albert was the name given to several chimps used in these experiments. These missions were to study the effects of space travel on living things, focusing on issues like weightlessness and the impact of high-speed launches and re-entries. Sucks that a bunch of animals had to die, but it really did help move the technology forward. Next up, we have the Soyuz MS-10 launch. This would have been a pretty scary incident. So on October 11th of 2018, a spacecraft launched carrying 2 crew members, Russian cosmonaut Alexei Ovchinin and NASA astronaut Nick Hague, to the International Space Station. But just over 2 minutes into the flight, the crew reported feeling weightless. Turned out there was a booster separation issue. The rocket's first and second stages separated during the ascent to propel the spacecraft into orbit, but one of the 4 boosters failed to detach properly, so the spacecraft's launch escape system was activated. I never want to be in space and hear escape system activated. That is freaky. This system is designed to rapidly propel the crew capsule away from the rocket in the event of a launch malfunction. Fortunately, it worked, and the Soyuz MS-10 capsule was separated from the malfunctioning rocket. The capsule then made its descent, but at a much steeper trajectory than a normal landing. So the crew actually experienced about 7 times Earth's gravity on the way down. Imagine how insane that would feel, especially after having just felt weightless. Now you have 7 times Earth gravity pressing down on you. That's a pretty extreme contrast. But after the descent, the capsule touched down safely in a designated landing area in Kazakhstan, and both crew members emerged from the capsule unharmed. Up next, we have ammonia leaks. Ammonia is an important substance used in the International Space Station's cooling systems. These systems are responsible for maintaining the right temperature within the station to make sure equipment and systems operate properly. Ammonia is circulated through a series of pipes and radiators to help dissipate excess heat that gets generated by the components of the craft. But sometimes there can be issues with leakage. This is obviously a risk. The main concern with ammonia is that it can freeze into small ice particles in the vacuum of space, which could damage parts of the station. In 2013, there was an ammonia leak on the ISS. Astronauts detected small white flakes of ammonia outside the station during a routine spacewalk. There was a faulty pump module, so astronauts had to walk outside the station and remove and replace it. Pretty scary situation, but the repairs were successful. Next up, we have the discovery of a pretty volatile substance known as moon dust. So moon dust, or lunar regolith, is this fine, powdery stuff all over the moon's surface. It's made of tiny particles smashed together by meteoroids over tons and tons of years, but don't let the word dust fool you into thinking the worst thing it can do is make you sneeze. This is not a harmless substance. Moon dust is sharp, rough, highly reactive because the moon doesn't have weathering like we do here. This dust sticks to gear, and that's bad news for spacesuits, spacecraft, and machinery. You know, it's rough and it gets everywhere. I hate moon dust. Breathing or eating this dust would be deadly. It messes with your breathing, can cause severe health problems. So this lunar dust can be a pain for equipment, causing potential breakdowns. And back in the Apollo missions, astronauts had problems with moon dust sticking to their spacesuits, and there were worries about potential health risks in the long term. If it wasn't already abundantly clear based on all the space docs and movies out there, space is a very volatile place. Finally, we have the challenges of lower gravity in space, more specifically the negative effects it has on astronauts' bodies. I always wanted to experience weightlessness, basically like flying, really floating, really, but it looks fun. I'd imagine though it'd be very nauseating after a while. Well, there are a number of negative side effects of weightlessness in space, aside from just an upset stomach. First, the lack of resistance that Earth's gravity puts on us on a constant basis can lead to muscle atrophy. The muscles that aren't actively used, especially the ones that support posture and body weight on Earth, can weaken and decrease in size. Then you have bone problems. On Earth, bones undergo constant stress, also because of gravity. This helps maintain bone density. And microgravity, the lack of stress on bones, can lead to a loss of bone density, making them more prone to fractures and weakening. Fluids in the body tend to shift towards the upper body and head in microgravity. This can actually affect the cardiovascular system in a negative way. Some astronauts have even reported changes in vision during and after extended stays in space. Weightlessness also seems to affect the immune system, making astronauts more susceptible to infections. Scientists still aren't 100% sure why that is, though. And then, of course, there's just the psychological effects for a prolonged time out in space. It doesn't just relate to the lack of gravity, but everything. Feelings of isolation, stress, working in a confined space, out in space, as far away from the rest of the world as you can get. Sounds kind of nice, but I think it would be pretty trippy after a while. Once again, I tip my hat. And with all that said, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.